In a galaxy far from Earth, the alien queen had everything: power, wealth, and an army of nannies to care for her precious children. Yet, despite her vast resources, none of them could make her babies laugh. Frustrated, and on the verge of desperation, the queen fired 30 nannies in just 10 days. But when a humble human janitor, a single dad with no special skills beyond his love for his children, stepped in, the unthinkable happened. He did what no one else could. He made her babies laugh. Before we dive into this heartwarming tale, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode will be even more surprising than today's. In the grand chambers of the alien citadel, the air was thick with tension. The walls, made of a shimmering metal unknown to human eyes, reflected the light of distant stars, casting an eerie glow across the room. The alien queen stood tall, her armored frame a striking contrast to the delicate, laughing children sprawled across the lavish bed before her. Yet, despite the richness of her world, there was no joy in her eyes. Her once glorious empire had been built on fear, but her softest tenderness, the love for her offspring, was proving to be her downfall. She had tried everything to bring laughter to her children, who, despite their vibrant green skin and playful demeanor, remained eerily silent. Her nannies, the finest in the galaxy, had failed one by one. Some had tried to amuse them with tricks, others with toys crafted from the rarest materials, but nothing worked. The queen's patience was wearing thin. "Another one gone," she muttered, her voice cold as she glanced at her advisor, a creature with shifting features and multiple eyes. "Yes, Your Majesty. The 29th, the advisor replied, his voice laced with discomfort. "The children, do not speak of them," the queen snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Her eyes narrowed, and she turned away, pacing along the room. The children giggled, unaware of the tension in the room. They nestled closer to their blankets, their innocent faces framed by tufts of vibrant green hair, each one a perfect image of their mother. Yet, no matter how many nannies had come and gone, there was no laughter in their eyes, no spark of joy. The queen's hand clenched into a fist. How could this be? She, the most powerful being in the galaxy, could not even care for her own children in the way they needed. Was this her weakness? Her mind raced, but one thought kept repeating itself. "I cannot fail them." Her advisor cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps, Your Majesty, we could consider alternatives. There are rumors about a human janitor who—" The queen froze, her gaze snapping toward the advisor. "A janitor?" she scoffed. "What could a janitor possibly do for my children?" "He's a single father," the advisor pressed, stepping carefully closer. "His children adore him. It is said his presence alone brings them joy. It is unorthodox, but perhaps he could—" The queen scoffed once more, dismissing the idea with a wave of her hand. "Bring me this janitor, then. If he can bring laughter to my children, I'll allow him to stay. But if he fails—" She hesitated, her eyes narrowing like storm clouds gathering overhead. "He will be the next to leave." And so, word was sent throughout the citadel to summon the one human who, despite all odds, might be the last hope for the queen's children. Elias Ward had never imagined that his life would lead him to this moment. The quiet hum of the citadel's corridors, the soft squeak of his mop against the smooth floors, and the steady rhythm of his cleaning routine were what defined his days. A single father with a small child of his own, Elias had found peace in the simple, unnoticed tasks of janitorial work. It wasn't glamorous, nor was it powerful, but it was enough. He was used to being invisible, blending into the background of a world that had no place for people like him. But that morning, everything had changed. Word of the Queen's summons had reached him in the midst of his usual duties, sweeping up after an alien delegation in a room that could have easily been mistaken for a palace. The message was clear: the Queen of Threxion demands your presence. A janitor? Why me? Elias had thought. But curiosity tugged at him, and a part of him wondered if this was some kind of mistake. Still, the alien bureaucracy had a way of being precise. He couldn't ignore it. The Queen's chambers were as majestic as one would expect. The towering walls reflected the eerie light from the stars outside, and the vastness of the room seemed to swallow him whole as he entered. Elias kept his head down, his overalls slightly stained with the grime of his day's work. He wasn't supposed to be here, and he certainly wasn't prepared for whatever awaited him. The Queen stood before him, an imposing figure draped in gleaming armor. She regarded him with an intensity that could make even the most powerful beings in the galaxy falter. Her gaze was unwavering, yet there was something else there, something vulnerable that she hid beneath her regal mask. Her children, Elias, could see them now, giggling softly, their green hair like halos in the dim light. "You are the janitor?" The Queen's voice was cold but not unkind. "Yes, Your Majesty," Elias replied, bowing his head slightly. "I was told you needed assistance." "Assistance?" The Queen's lips curled in frustration. "I've had 30 nannies, all of them the finest in the galaxy. None of them have made my children laugh." She glanced at the babies, her tone softening just enough to betray her frustration. "You are my last hope." Elias blinked, uncertain of how he could possibly help. I don't know if I can do anything, Your Majesty," he said quietly. "But I'll try." The Queen tilted her head. "Try," she repeated almost to herself. "If you fail, you will leave. But if you succeed, you'll be more than just a janitor to me." With that, Elias stepped forward, his mind racing. He had no plan, no strategy. All he had was the gentle way he cared for his own child. Maybe, just maybe, that would be enough here. Elias stood awkwardly in the center of the Queen's grand chamber, surrounded by the delicate silence that only royalty seemed to command. The children, with their small green faces and large bright eyes, were still, as if waiting for something to break the stillness. The Queen observed him closely, her gaze both calculating and expectant. Elias knew there was no turning back now. Taking a deep breath, he shifted his weight and gently approached one of the babies, a small girl with tufted green hair and big, curious eyes. He didn't know what to do. In his experience, the simplest way to make a child laugh was to play, to show warmth and kindness without overthinking it. But these weren't just any children. They were the Queen's children. Elias had no idea what kind of cosmic pressure weighed on them. Still, he knelt down and smiled, trying to be reassuring. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice steady. "You seem like a quiet one." He held out his hand slowly, letting her observe him first. The baby blinked, her tiny hand reaching up toward him. She grabbed hold of his finger with surprising strength, her lips curling into a soft, uncertain smile. Elias chuckled softly and slowly began to rock back and forth, pretending to stumble like he was about to fall. "Whoops, almost fell. Can you catch me?" he said in a playful tone. For a moment, there was nothing. The room seemed to hold its breath, the tension unbearable. Then, the baby giggled a high-pitched, infectious sound. Elias's heart skipped a beat. It was the first sound of joy he'd heard from these children. The Queen's eyes widened, and for the first time since he'd entered the room, her face softened. She didn't speak, but Elias could see the flicker of hope in her gaze. Encouraged, Elias continued, using the same light-hearted tone. "Oh, I better be careful, huh? Don't want to fall on you." He gently poked her sides, just enough to make her squirm, and she erupted in a burst of laughter. The other children, seeing their siblings' joy, stirred. One by one, they began to giggle, the sound like soft chimes ringing through the room. Elias could feel the tension in the air shift. The Queen took a slow step forward, her eyes never leaving her children. Elias chuckled along with them, even though he felt a little out of place. He had never been a performer. He was just a dad who did what he could to make his child smile. But this felt different. It wasn't just about making them laugh. It was about making them feel safe, loved, seen. The Queen stood motionless, her regal composure slowly melting away as she watched Elias. Her children were laughing, truly laughing, and it was all because of a simple human touch. Elias, still kneeling, smiled as the babies clung to him, their tiny hands reaching for his arms, their laughter ringing in his ears. It felt like a small victory, one that didn't require power or influence, just love. But there was one question left. Would it be enough for the Queen to see it? The sound of laughter continued to fill the room, echoing off the cold, polished walls of the citadel. It was the first time in a long while that the queen felt something other than control or cold authority. The pure, untainted joy of her children, something she thought was impossible for them to experience, was now unfolding before her, and it was all because of the human janitor who had nothing to offer but kindness. Elias watched the babies, their green faces lighting up with genuine happiness. Their giggles were contagious, making him chuckle along with them. It felt almost surreal to be here, in this moment, on this foreign world, with the powerful Queen of Threxion standing just feet away. But as his heart swelled with pride, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the Queen's gaze, as if she were dissecting every movement, every word. "Enough," the Queen said, her voice suddenly sharp, like a blade cutting through the warm atmosphere. The laughter faltered, but Elias didn't stop. He wanted to give the children more time, more of this feeling. But the Queen raised her hand, and everything came to a halt. The babies, who had been so carefree moments ago, fell quiet once again. The energy in the room shifted instantly, and the Queen's presence loomed over them like a storm. She took a step forward, her expression unreadable. "What is this?" she asked, her voice softer now, but still carrying a weight that made the air seem heavier. "You bring laughter to my children when I have had 30 of the finest caretakers, and they failed me. Why did you succeed?" Elias felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. He had no explanation, no grand answer. His whole life had been spent in the shadows, unnoticed by those in power. And now, here he was, standing before the most powerful being in the galaxy, with nothing but the simple truth to offer. "I don't know," Elias said quietly, looking up at her. "I'm just a dad. I do what I can for my child, and I guess I just tried to do the same for them." The Queen's eyes flickered with something unexpected. Was it curiosity? She studied him for a moment, her sharp gaze piercing, as if she were seeing him for the first time. "You don't understand, do you?" she said, her tone changing, softening just slightly. "These children are not like yours. They are heirs to the throne of Threxion. Their lives are mapped out, every moment of their existence dictated by the power that courses through their blood. They cannot afford to be like other children. And yet, here you are, making them laugh as if they are not bound by the weight of the galaxy." Elias was silent for a moment, feeling the weight of her words. He didn't have the power of a queen, nor did he come from a lineage of rulers. But in that moment, he realized that maybe the greatest power was the ability to make someone feel human again, to let them laugh, to remind them of their innocence. "I don't know what they're meant to be," Elias said, his voice steady, "but I know what they are right now. They're children. And sometimes children just need to play." The Queen stared at him, her regal mask wavering for a brief second. She had never considered the simplest truth. Power, lineage, duty, all those things she had built her life around had never allowed her to see the world in such a way. For a moment, they stood in silence, and Elias realized something important. This was not just about the babies. This was about the Queen herself. She had spent her life commanding, ruling with an iron fist, but in her heart there was a loneliness that no empire could fill. And perhaps, just perhaps, Elias had given her a glimpse of something she had long forgotten. The Queen stood in silence, her gaze fixed on Elias as the children's laughter slowly faded. It echoed in the chamber, filling the space with a warmth she hadn't expected to feel. For the first time in years, she felt the heavy weight of her crown begin to lift, if only a little. Elias stood quietly, unsure of what to do next. He wasn't a hero, nor a leader. He was just a single father who had stumbled into a situation he didn't fully understand. Yet, in this moment, he had done the impossible. He had brought joy to the Queen's children, something 30 nannies had failed to do. The Queen's voice broke the silence, soft but tinged with something deeper than frustration. "I have spent my life shaping them to inherit a throne of power. I have pushed them to be perfect, to be rulers, but I have forgotten what it means to simply be a child." Elias hesitated. "Children just need to play," he said quietly, his words simple but true. The Queen studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "You see me differently. You see me as human." Elias didn't know how to answer. So he remained silent, his eyes on the children who had fallen into peaceful sleep, their small bodies curled up like tiny planets in their mother's shadow. The queen took a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since Elias had entered the room. She turned her gaze to the children, then back to Elias. "You are right," she said, her voice softening. "I have spent so long focused on power and legacy, I forgot what it means to be just a person." Elias felt a strange shift in the air, like a fog lifting. "Maybe we all need to remember that sometimes," he said quietly. The queen's lips parted slightly, as if considering his words. "You have earned your place here," she said, her voice taking on a new, more authoritative tone. "You will stay not as a janitor, but as something more. You will be their guardian. You will teach them what no one else has, what it means to live beyond duty." Elias blinked, taken aback by her words. "Me, a guardian? Yes," the queen said firmly. "You will show them that there is more to life than power and responsibility. They will know joy." Elias stood a little taller, his chest swelling with a mix of disbelief and pride. For the first time since his arrival on Threxion, he felt a sense of purpose. It wasn't about cleaning floors anymore. He was here to shape the future not just of a royal family, but of a kingdom that needed more than just rulers. It needed humanity. The days that followed felt surreal to Elias. His world had shifted, from sweeping the endless hallways of the citadel to standing at the center of its most important space. The queen had made it clear he was no longer a mere janitor. His new role was one he hadn't imagined, one that came with its own weight. He was to be the guardian of her children, the one who would help them grow beyond the constraints of their royal bloodline. At first, Elias wasn't sure what to do. He had no training in the ways of royalty, no lessons on diplomacy or power, but he knew children, and he knew how to make them laugh, how to bring them the joy they so desperately needed. It was in the small moments, a kind word, a playful gesture, that he could offer them something the galaxy's finest tutors couldn't: genuine warmth. Each day, Elias spent time with the queen's children, teaching them simple games, telling them stories from his own world, stories of growing up in a place where laughter was as important as food. The babies responded eagerly, their bright eyes wide with curiosity as they laughed and played with him, forgetting the weight of their future for just a little while. The queen watched from a distance at first, skeptical but intrigued. She had tried so hard to mold her children into something they weren't, shaping them to carry the heavy legacy of the Threxian throne. But Elias was showing her something different, a future where her children could grow into leaders, not just by power, but by kindness and joy. It wasn't long before Elias saw a shift in the queen. She began to spend more time with her children, stepping away from her throne to watch them play. Though her presence was still imposing, there was a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She no longer seemed like a ruler trapped by her duties. Instead, she was beginning to rediscover the person she once was before the crown weighed so heavily on her. One evening, as Elias sat with the children, the queen approached him. "You've done more than I ever expected," she said, her voice calm but filled with sincerity. "You've reminded me that the strength of a ruler isn't only in their power, but in their ability to care for those they protect." Elias looked up, a humble smile on his face. "I'm just doing what I know, Your Majesty." The queen nodded. "And that's why it works. You've given my children something I couldn't. You've given them love." It was a simple truth, but one that resonated deeply with Elias. In this alien world, amidst all the politics and power struggles, love had become a rare commodity. He had brought it back, not through grand gestures, but through the quiet moments, the laughter, and the care that only a parent could provide. As Elias watched the children fall asleep that night, their small hands clutching his fingers, he realized that this was the role he had always been meant for. Not as a janitor, not as a servant, but as a father, a protector, a guardian of joy. The days passed, each one filled with laughter and play that Elias had brought back to the queen's children. The citadel, once cold and silent, now resonated with warmth. But as Elias grew closer to the children, the queen's presence became more complicated. There was something brewing beneath the surface, an unspoken question that needed answering. One evening, as the sun set behind the citadel's towering walls, the queen summoned Elias to her private chambers. The air felt heavier tonight, as if a decision was hanging in the balance. "You've been with us for months now," the queen began, her tone steady but measured. "I never thought a simple janitor could do what you've done for my children." Elias shifted uncomfortably, unsure where this conversation was heading. He had grown used to the queen's distant authority, but there was a softness in her voice tonight that caught him off guard. "You've given them something I couldn't," she continued. "Laughter, joy. I tried to teach them duty, to shape them for their future, but I neglected what they truly needed." She paused, her gaze softening as she looked at him. "You've reminded me of something I'd forgotten." Elias looked down at his hands, unsure how to respond. "I didn't do anything special. I just tried to be there for them." The queen studied him for a moment before speaking again. "That's what makes you different. You see my children not as heirs to a throne, but as children human, vulnerable, deserving of more than just training and power." Elias swallowed hard. He had never thought of himself as anything more than a janitor, just a man doing his job. Yet here, in this moment, he realized that his role had become something much greater than he could have ever imagined. The queen's voice softened further. "I've ruled this empire with an iron hand, Elias, and I've lost sight of what truly matters. But you've brought something back into my life that I never expected. You've shown me that strength doesn't just lie in power. It lies in love, in care, in moments like these." Elias felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He had never seen the queen like this, vulnerable, questioning, seeking something beyond the throne. "You've earned your place here," she said finally, her tone both firm and kind. "Not as a janitor, but as something more. I want you to stay. You will be my children's guardian, Elias. You will teach them what it means to live beyond duty, beyond the throne." Elias stared at her, stunned. "Me? A guardian?" "Yes," the queen said simply. "You have done what no one else could. And now, I ask you to help shape their future." Elias nodded slowly, his heart swelling with a mixture of disbelief and pride. This wasn't the life he had imagined, but perhaps it was the life he was meant for. The days that followed were filled with change. Elias had gone from being an unnoticed janitor to a key figure in the Queen's court. His role as guardian to the royal children was both humbling and overwhelming, but it brought a sense of purpose he hadn't known before. His every action, every word, was now carefully watched by the Queen and her advisors. At first, the children didn't understand the shift. They had been used to Elias's presence as just another caretaker, but soon they began to see him differently, as someone they could turn to for comfort, for laughter, and even for guidance. Elias was not just there to clean the halls or make them laugh. He was there to teach them things no tutor ever could: how to experience the world with wonder, how to feel joy in the simplest moments. One afternoon, as they sat in the courtyard of the citadel, Elias watched as the children played in the warm light. They chased each other through the gardens, their laughter filling the air. Elias smiled, but his mind was on the Queen. She had entrusted him with this immense responsibility, and he knew the stakes were higher than ever. Her empire, her children, their future, it was all tied to what he was doing now. The Queen had begun spending more time with them, stepping down from her throne to observe them in their moments of play. It was clear that she was learning, slowly but surely, that there was more to life than ruling. Elias had reminded her of that, the importance of human connection, of love, of what it meant to truly be alive, not just to survive. One evening, as the children lay down to sleep, the Queen approached Elias, her face thoughtful. "You've changed them," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I've seen it. They are becoming more than just the heirs to my throne. They are becoming people, and that is because of you." Elias felt the weight of her words. "I'm just doing what I can, Your Majesty. I'm not doing anything special." "No," the Queen replied, her eyes meeting his. "You're doing something no one else could. You've shown them the world outside their birthright. You've shown them that laughter, joy, love, those things are just as important as power." She paused, and Elias could see the emotion in her eyes. "I've spent my life teaching them how to rule, but you, Elias, have taught them how to live." He was speechless for a moment, his heart swelling with a pride he hadn't expected. He wasn't just cleaning floors anymore. He was shaping the future, not through commands or laws, but through small acts of care and compassion. "Thank you," the queen whispered, her voice breaking the silence. "You've reminded me of what I almost lost, and for that, I am forever grateful." Elias nodded, his throat tight with emotion. In that moment he realized that his journey had only just begun. Being a guardian was not just about protecting them physically, it was about shaping them emotionally, showing them the beauty of the world beyond their royal responsibilities. He wasn't just here to serve anymore, he was here to guide them towards something greater. Elias had become a fixture in the royal court, but the responsibilities that came with his new position were not without their challenges. The queen, though still a powerful ruler, had started to change. Elias had witnessed it in the quiet moments when she spent time with her children, listening to them laugh, or when she began to let go of her iron grip on the empire, allowing herself to be vulnerable in front of her closest advisors. But not everyone was pleased with these changes. The royal court was filled with whispers, some of them harsh, others questioning. The nobles, the generals, and even some of the queen's trusted aides began to voice their concerns. They were worried about the impact Elias was having on the royal family, and some feared his influence would lead the empire into disarray. One day, as Elias walked the citadel's halls, he was stopped by a familiar figure, a senior advisor to the queen, one of the oldest and most powerful voices in the court. "Elias," the advisor said sternly, his voice low, "the queen's leniency is dangerous. The children's laughter is all well and good, but what happens when they must face their duties? What happens when the weight of the throne demands their full attention?" Elias felt a lump form in his throat. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with an unspoken question. "We want you to understand that the path you've set them on isn't one of power," the advisor replied. "Laughter and joy are fleeting. Ruling an empire is not a game. They cannot afford to grow up to be weak, Elias." Elias stood silently, contemplating his response. He knew the weight of their words, but he also knew the truth. The children needed both joy and duty. They needed the balance that he had given them, the warmth that came from being loved and cared for. "If they can't laugh, they can't lead," Elias said quietly, looking the advisor in the eye. "A ruler who has never known love cannot understand the people they lead. Power without compassion is hollow." The advisor's eyes narrowed. "Then you risk everything, Elias. The throne, the future. Are you truly prepared to gamble with their legacy?" Elias didn't flinch. "I'm not gambling with their legacy. I'm giving them the chance to choose their future, to be more than their birthright." The advisor walked away, but Elias felt the weight of the conversation settle in his chest. The court's doubts were growing. Would the queen's trust in him prove to be her downfall? Or was there a new way for the royal family to rule, one that wasn't solely based on power and fear? The future, it seemed, was more uncertain than ever. The days that followed were a turning point for both Elias and the queen. The pressure from the court grew, and the whispers in the halls of the citadel became louder. But the queen, for the first time, stood firm. She had made her choice. She would not go back to the way things were before Elias had entered her life. She would not raise her children to be cold, unfeeling rulers. They would know love, they would know joy, they would be more than the crown they were born into. One evening, as Elias watched over the sleeping children, the queen entered the room. Her face was calm, but there was a new fire in her eyes. "You were right," she said softly, her voice carrying an air of finality. "They need laughter, they need warmth. I've been a ruler for so long that I forgot what it means to be a mother." 7. Elias turned to face her, his heart swelling with pride. "Your Majesty, it's never too late to change." She nodded, her gaze softening. "I know, and I've decided, Elias, my children will learn both. They will learn to lead, but they will also learn to live. They will carry the weight of their bloodline, but they will also know how to smile when the weight becomes too much." Elias smiled, knowing that his work was far from over. The queen's decision wasn't just about raising her children differently, it was about changing the very nature of leadership. Power, compassion, joy, duty, these would no longer be separate. They would be woven together, creating a new kind of ruler for a new kind of empire. The queen turned to leave but stopped at the door. "Elias," she said, her voice filled with quiet gratitude. "You've shown me what true strength is, and for that, you will always have my trust." Elias watched her walk away, a quiet sense of peace settling over him. His time here had been more than he ever expected. He had come to the citadel as a janitor, and now he stood as the guardian of the future, a future where laughter and joy were just as important as power. In the end, it wasn't the throne that mattered. It was the love that filled the citadel's halls, the laughter of the children, the trust of the queen, and the quiet work of a man who had reminded them all what it truly meant to be human.